Ladies and gentlemen, please stand. Their Excellencies, the Right Honourable Dame Patsy Reddy, Governor-General of New Zealand, and Sir David Gascoigne.
E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā iwi o ngā hoe whā, tēnei aku mihi mahana ki a koutou. Kia ora tātou katoa, nau mai, haere mai rā, ki te whare kawana. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, warm greetings to you all and welcome to Government House. I specifically acknowledge the Honourable Stuart Nash, Minister of the Crown, Air Marshal Kevin Short, Chief of Defence, and other members of the Defence Force, Acting Commissioner of New Zealand Police, John Timms, Lieutenant General Rhys Jones, Chief Executive of Fire and Emergency New Zealand, Mr Patrick Holmes, Chief Executive of Coast Guard New Zealand, our kuia, Mrs Turipuai Higgins, and our kaumātua, Professor Piri Shasha. Tēnā koutou. It is a real pleasure to host this investiture ceremony and bring together 14 honour recipients along with their family and friends to recognise the contributions they've made to our country. As Governor-General, I have the authority and the privilege on behalf of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, the Queen of New Zealand, to hold an investiture for her and to confer the honours to which each recipient is entitled. Ladies and gentlemen, as each one is honoured, I invite you to join me in thanking and congratulating them for their service to our country. Hewitt Humphrey will now summon the recipients and read a citation for each one.
Your Excellency, to receive the insignia of an Officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit, Mr Ken Clearwater of Kaiapoi for services to male survivors of sexual abuse. Mr Ken Clearwater has managed the Male Survivors of Sexual Abuse Trust in Christchurch for 20 years. He helped bring about changes to legislation that allowed male survivors to be eligible for support. He established a program which is still used today for men in prisons who were victims of abuse. Mr Clearwater has shared the peer support model being used in New Zealand at international conferences, and he was the male survivor representative on the Government Task Force on Action Against Sexual Violence and the Sensitive Claims Advisory Group to ACC. He's been a member of the steering group for Te Ohaki Ahine National Network Ending Sexual Violence Together. Mr Clearwater helped establish Male Survivors Aotearoa and the South-South Institute on Sexual Violence Against Men and Boys. Major General Peter Kelly of Wellington for services to the New Zealand Defence Force. Major General Peter Kelly completed a 3-year term as Chief of Army in 2018. In this role, he led the introduction of several significant capabilities and major change programs, including the Network-Enabled Army Program, the In-Service Weapon Replacement Program, the Soldier Modernization Program, and the Protected Mobility Capability Program. Previously, he served on the United Nations Truth Supervisory Organization in Israel, Lebanon, and Syria as Detachment Commander of the NZSAS Group Force Element in Kuwait, with the International Force East Timor as Senior National Officer on Operation Concord in Afghanistan and on Operation Concord 3. Major General Kelly was military attaché in Washington, D.C., and held appointments as Director, Special Operations Directorate, Land Component Commander at Headquarters, Joint Forces New Zealand, and Deputy Chief of Army. Your Excellency, to receive the insignia of a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit, Senior Sergeant Bruce Adams of Wellington for services to the New Zealand Police and the community. Senior Sergeant Bruce Adams is the New Zealand Police's representative on WorkSafe New Zealand's Diving Industry Advisory Group. He runs training exercises and provides advice to other agencies. He's worked with and helped develop search and recovery procedures for the police and the Royal New Zealand Navy. He's the police representative for Water Safety New Zealand, spends time with youth groups, and has taken part in the Tuakana Tena Water Safety Program to teach life-saving skills to at-risk youth. He's coordinated the response to diverse search and rescue operations. Senior Sergeant Adams supports child cancer fundraising initiatives and provides gifts and visits for young children in hospital. Mr. Ian Cord of Riverton for services to the Coast Guard. Mr. Ian Cord has been a volunteer with Coast Guard New Zealand for 31 years. As a member of Coast Guard Riverton Unit, he's helped manage search and rescue for a number of major incidents in Foveaux Strait. He's been the unit's safety officer, coxswain, search and rescue coordinator, and president. He's a Coast Guard boating education tutor, teaching a wide variety of courses. He was a board member for Coast Guard Southern Region and Coast Guard New Zealand and served 3 years as president. Mr. Cord is currently the independent member representing the search and rescue volunteer sector on the New Zealand Search and Rescue Council. Professor Devon Polashek of Hamilton for services to criminal psychology. Professor Devon Polashek is a forensic clinical psychologist who studies the psychology of violent offenders, specifically in the high-risk category. She was a researcher and professor of criminal psychology at Victoria University of Wellington and conducted research at the Rimutaka Prison Special Treatment Unit Rehabilitation Program, STIRP. Through this research, she sought to devise and evaluate new methods of rehabilitating and reintegrating high-risk men into society. She's produced more than 120 books, book chapters, research articles, and government reports. A former Fulbright scholar, Professor Polashek currently directs the newly formed New Zealand Institute for Security and Crime Science at the University of Waikato. Your Excellency, to receive the Queen's Service Medal, Mr. Gary Aitken of Auckland for services to Fire and Emergency New Zealand and the community. Gary Aitken was part of the Opunaki Volunteer Fire Brigade and the Warkworth Brigade, where he became Chief Fire Officer and Brigade Secretary. He was President of the Committee of the Auckland Suburban Fire Brigade Sub-Association and Chairman of the United Fire Brigades Association, UFBA, National Competition Panel. He was a member of the Junior Chamber of Commerce in Opunaki and was Treasurer of the local St John Ambulance Association and the Opunaki Rugby Football Club. Mr. Aitken was club captain of the Warkworth Tennis Club and served on the committee of the Warkworth Pony Club. Mrs. Bonnie Dobson of Matata for services to Fire and Emergency New Zealand and the community. Bonnie Dobson is a volunteer operational support senior firefighter with the Matata Volunteer Fire Brigade and an ambulance officer with the St John Whakatane. Following the 2005 Matata floods, she helped establish a recording system to account for every person in the township. She also helped organise the collection of donated gear and food for the neighbouring brigades that assisted Matata. Mrs. Dobson has been a member and treasurer of the Board of Trustees of Matata Primary School, has worked with the Matata Village Volunteer Book Exchange and fundraised for new club rooms for the Matata Rugby and Sports Club. Mr. Brian Stiles of Carterton for services to the United Fire Brigades Association and the community. Brian Stiles is Chief Fire Officer of the Carterton Volunteer Fire Brigade. As a member of the United Fire Brigades Association Technical Panel, he oversaw the organisation of UFBA firefighter competitions. He served as Vice President and later President of the United Fire Brigades Association of New Zealand. He's been a trustee of the UFBA Benevolent Fund, which provides financial assistance to firefighters and their families in times of financial stress. Through the Carterton Fire Brigade, he supported the Gladstone and Carterton Rugby football clubs. Mr. Stiles was also a representative rugby player. Mr. Alan Tapp of Milton for services to Fire and Emergency New Zealand and the community. Alan Tapp has been a volunteer firefighter for more than 46 years and was Chief Fire Officer of the Milton Volunteer Fire Brigade. He's been involved with the Milton Lions Club and the Toko Rugby Club, coaching at club level and selecting and managing at the sub-union level. He's taken part as both competitor and coach in waterway and road crash competitions and was chairperson of the Otago Southland Challenge panel. Mr. Tapp has also served on the Clutha District Emergency Services Committee, the Milton Civil Defence Group and the Clutha District Search and Rescue. Ms. Whitiaere Timutimu of Gisborne for services to criminal justice programs and the community. Whitiaere Timutimu is the Māori responsive advisor for the New Zealand Police and has supported work within the reintegration of former inmates into the community. She's helped direct the formation of several criminal justice programs, such as the Atapai Youth Mentoring Program, which involved an intense fitness training schedule. She has two other youth mentoring programs, Community Youth, which mentors LGBTQI+ youth, and Tuakana Teina, which is mentoring for youth with a parent in prison. Ms. Timutimu has organised Te Pae Oranga iwi panels and continues to make an impact on the successful rehabilitation of offenders. Mrs. Sonia Wilson of Rotorua for services to victim support and the community. Sonia Wilson worked for a non-government agency to provide support to vulnerable families in Rotorua. She held many roles, including kitchen hand, residential and dormitory worker, and health coordinator. She joined Oranga Tamariki as a care and protection social worker, eventually becoming a supervisor and then manager of the Rotorua Youth Justice Team. She's currently Victim Support's longest-serving volunteer at 27 years. Mrs. Wilson has specialised in supporting those bereaved by suicide, sudden death and homicide, and working with families who have children who are victims of or have witnessed trauma or accidents. Mr. Pete Woodward of Paraparaumu for services to the Coast Guard. Pete Woodward is a senior member of the regular volunteer crew at the Kapiti Coast Guard, acting as communications officer. He's on call 24/7. As fundraising officer for Kapiti Coast Guard, he's overseen the raising of more than $300,000 for operation and capital expenditure. He was one of the main instigators to promote the replacement of the local Coast Guard rescue vessel, campaigning for more than 4 years to raise $200,000. The boat is now under construction and will provide assistance to recreational boat users and also offer support for the increasing tourist traffic to and from Kapiti Island Sanctuary. Your Excellency, to receive the New Zealand Distinguished Service Decoration, Mr. Danny Broughton of Upper Hutt for services to the New Zealand Defence Force. Danny Broughton, then as Warrant Officer of the New Zealand Defence Force, made significant contributions to welfare and development matters, particularly during the period 2014 to 2018 that have assisted NZDF in becoming a more effective, inclusive and responsive military organisation. Since 2014, he's represented the NZDF at the global planning meetings for the Invictus Games, an international multi-sport event for wounded, injured and sick armed services personnel. He was a vocal campaigner for the Defence Force's programme to tackle unwanted attitudes and behaviours through the Operation Respect programme. His personal involvement ensured issues and expectations were discussed openly and not dismissed, contributing to the success of this programme. He's worked with Overwatch Group, the internal support group for NZDF's LGBTQI+ community. He supported Overwatch members at high-profile public events, including the Auckland Pride Parade, setting an example for other uniformed public sector organisations. He's worked to identify, mentor and accelerate advancement for an emerging group of talented non-commissioned officer leaders. He's worked to further New Zealand's reputation for military professionalism, personally leading engagement with international military partners, especially on matters of professional development of the senior non-commissioned officer group. Warrant Officer Broughton has networked with counterparts in other militaries around the Pacific to improve military standards across the region. Dr. Peter Hurley of Palmerston North for services to the New Zealand Defence Force and aviation medicine. Dr. Peter Hurley has served in both the New Zealand Army and Royal New Zealand Air Force as a uniformed and civilian medical officer in a variety of roles since 1990, with a particular emphasis on aviation medicine. As the first formally trained aviation medicine specialist in the RNZAF, Dr. Hurley has been at the forefront of developments in this field and influenced much of the aviation medicine policy that supports current air operations. The period 2002 to 2005 saw a reduction in the size of the Air Force medical establishment, and during this time he was the only serving RNZAF doctor. He single-handedly maintained a medical service supported by a small staff. From 2005 to 2013, he served as the Director of Air Force Medicine, during which time he re-established the medical trade in the RNZAF and rebuilt the capacity of the Air Force medical system. He's been active in the Airspace Interoperability Council, serving for many years as the head of delegation for the Airspace Medicine Group. He's a council member of the Australasian Military Medicine Association. For many years he's been a Civil Aviation Authority medical examiner. Dr. Hurley continues to support RNZAF operations at Ohakea as a civilian medical officer and member of the Active Reserve. Your Excellency, the investiture is concluded.
An investiture ceremony is the most important event I hold on behalf of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, the Queen of New Zealand. It allows me, as Governor-General, to recognise and thank an extraordinary group of people on behalf of all New Zealanders. By using their talents to make ours a better society, whether by service to their communities or by their leadership in diverse fields of endeavour, or their commitment to excellence in their own field of expertise, our recipients have set a fine example to others, encouraging them in their own endeavours. This morning, we've recognised a number of members of New Zealand's uniformed services and service organisations who have displayed courage and commitment and given dedicated service to our country, often in challenging and dangerous situations. This ceremony has also recognised people who've dedicated their professional and personal energies for the benefit of victims, survivors and offenders, work which also requires courage and strength of purpose in the face of difficult challenges. To the recipients, it's been a privilege to hear your stories today. You've demonstrated determination, commitment and compassion in your daily lives. In your own way, each of you has helped to make New Zealand a better place to live. In some cases, your influence and the positive impact of your work has extended beyond our shores. Your actions and the stories we've heard today reflect the spirit of the words of King George VI, the father of our Queen, when he said, "The highest of distinctions is service to others." Your contributions have enriched the cultural, social and economic fabric of Aotearoa New Zealand. Please wear your insignia with pride, knowing that your communities appreciate and value your work and are inspired by your example. On behalf of the Queen of New Zealand and all New Zealanders, I congratulate you on your achievements and I thank you for your service to our country. Kia ora hui tātou katoa. Ladies and gentlemen, that almost concludes the official part of today's ceremony. But before we break for refreshments, may I ask you to stand and join me in singing our national anthem in Māori and in English.